Myth. Wine legs mean the wine is high quality. People love staring at those streaky trails clinging to the inside of the glass, like they're reading tea leaves at a vineyard. These legs, also called tears, don't tell you anything about the wine's quality. They're actually just the result of a fluid dynamics effect, called the Marangoni effect, which sounds like a magician's name, but is really about surface tension gradients. When alcohol evaporates faster than water, it creates movement on the glass and forms those legs. That's it. The more alcohol, the more noticeable the legs. Residual sugar can make them thicker too, but they don't say a thing about how good the wine is, how it'll taste, or whether someone put love or boredom into the winemaking. Legs are like a wine's fingerprint, sure, but not its resume. So maybe stop swirling and squinting like you're cracking a code. You're just watching physics do its little dance. Myth. Sulfites are what cause wine headaches. This idea refuses to retire, even though the evidence never backed it up. Sulfites exist in many foods people eat daily, including dried fruit, without dramatic consequences. Wine headaches line up far more consistently with alcohol itself. Alcohol dehydrates you, messes with sleep, and widens blood vessels, which is not exactly a wellness routine. Dose matters too. Drinking more increases the chance of discomfort, shocking no one. Individual sensitivity plays a role, but sulfites still don't stand out as the villain. Studies and industry education sources repeatedly note there's no solid data showing sulfites cause headaches in the general population. I find it fascinating how sulfites became the scapegoat, while alcohol keeps getting a free pass. Blaming sulfites sounds scientific enough to repeat at dinner, but it ignores what's actually happening in your body. Hydration, pacing, and moderation usually matter more here overall. Myth. Decanting removes sulfites. This one's clinging on harder than a wine stain on a white shirt. Decanting does plenty of interesting things. It exposes wine to oxygen, softens bold flavors, and helps volatile compounds like some alcohols and aromas evaporate. But getting rid of sulfites? That's not on the list. Sulfites, especially the bound kind, are stubborn. They're not just floating around, waiting to vanish into thin air after a few minutes of swishing around in a fancy glass container. The whole idea that a quick pour and a little swirl makes wine magically cleaner is just wishful thinking with a corkscrew. If you're sensitive to sulfites, decanting isn't going to save you. It's like opening a window and hoping it gets rid of caffeine in your coffee. It makes the wine smell different, maybe taste smoother, but chemically, sulfites aren't checking out early. They're hanging around whether you like it or not. Myth. Organic or natural wine is sulfite-free. This one sounds nice, like a vineyard dream where everything's pure and untouched. But fermentation laughs at dreams. Sulfites form naturally during the fermentation process, even if nobody adds a single thing. So no, organic or natural doesn't mean sulfite-free. In the United States, for a wine to be labeled organic, it can have added sulfites. But that doesn't mean it has zero sulfites. If it naturally contains under 10 parts per million, it can skip the contains sulfites label. Cross that line, and the warning goes on the bottle. Natural wine is even looser in definition. So while it may have minimal intervention, that's not a guarantee of no sulfites either. It's chemistry, not marketing. I've seen people pick up an organic bottle and act like it's some kind of unicorn. It's still wine. It's still fermented. And that means some sulfites are tagging along, label or not. Myth. Room temperature is the best way to serve red wine. This myth is the reason some people think red wine tastes like warm jam. Room temperature made sense back when castles were drafty and nobody owned a space heater. Those old stone walls kept things around 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, ideal for many red wines. Modern rooms, not so much. They're often way too warm, especially in summer or under kitchen lights. At those temps, alcohol in the wine becomes louder, drowning out the more subtle flavors. Serving red wine a little cooler brings out the balance, tightens up fruit notes, and makes the whole thing feel less heavy. Lighter reds especially benefit from a slight chill. Of course, nobody's telling you to toss your Bordeaux in the freezer, but pretending every red is better warm is just outdated. I've tasted reds that went from flabby to fantastic just by dropping the temperature a few degrees. It's not tradition, it's thermodynamics. Myth: red wine should never be chilled. People treat this one like it's sacred law, passed down with stone tablets and a corkscrew. But not chilling red wine ever? That's just fear of missing out on better flavor. Some red wines, especially light-bodied ones like Pinot Noir or Gamay, actually improve when slightly chilled. A cooler temperature can lower the perception of alcohol burn and highlight acidity and freshness. It gives the wine more structure and makes it more food-friendly. Too warm, and those same wines can taste flat, soupy, or too boozy. Even fuller reds can handle a brief stint in the fridge, especially if they've been sitting out on a hot day. Nobody's saying chill it like a soda, but letting a red wine cool down to around 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit can make a huge difference. It's not a betrayal of the grape, it's an upgrade. I've tried reds both ways. One felt lazy, the other felt alive. Myth: white wine only goes with fish, and red wine only goes with red meat. This old school rule sounds clean and tidy, but wine pairing isn't a color-coded game. It's more about the wine's weight, tannin level, and what's actually happening on the plate. A tannic red can absolutely steamroll a delicate piece of fish, leaving the whole meal tasting like regret. But a light red like Pinot Noir or Gamay with a meaty fish like salmon, that works. On the flip side, rich creamy sauces on chicken or pork can pair beautifully with fuller-bodied whites. The sauce often does more pairing work than the protein. I've had spicy reds ruin steaks with heavy tannins that clashed with seasoning, and whites that matched better just because they played nice with the sauce. Thinking in terms of weight and structure unlocks way more options than sticking to color-based rules. Wine's not a uniform. It doesn't have to match the meat to make sense on your table. Myth: a cork closure is always better than a screw cap. People see a cork and assume they're holding something elegant. Meanwhile, the humble screw cap gets unfairly treated like wine in a tracksuit. But closures aren't fashion statements, they're engineering choices. A cork allows more oxygen to gradually enter the bottle over time, which can help some wines develop. But it's also unpredictable. Natural cork varies a lot and can cause faults like cork taint. Screw caps, on the other hand, are consistent and typically allow very little oxygen in, which helps preserve freshness. That makes them great for wines meant to be enjoyed young. And yes, there are even premium-aged wines under screw cap now. I've opened corked bottles that smelled like wet newspaper and cheap wines under screw cap that were bright and delicious. The closure should fit the wine's purpose, not someone's image of class. This isn't a romance novel. It's chemistry, and both closures know what they're doing. Myth: if a wine has a cork, it can't have closure-related faults. People love to assume that if it's sealed with cork, it's safe and natural and somehow immune to faults. But reality's got a different script. Cork taint, mostly caused by a compound called TCA, comes from the cork itself. That signature wet cardboard aroma? That's it. But here's the plot twist. Faults can also come from other sources: barrels, equipment, or even contamination during bottling. And just because it's got a screw cap doesn't mean it's immune from faults either, despite the stereotype. Taint rates vary depending on where the data comes from, but some tasting groups have reported noticeable fault levels in both closure types. I've had lovely wines ruined by cork and fresh ones dulled by bad bottling practices. There's no magic material that guarantees a perfect pour. People want closure types to be a quality shortcut, but faults aren't that polite. They show up wherever the chemistry or handling slips. Myth: a deeper punt means better wine. That deep dimple in the bottom of the wine bottle, the punt, gets way more credit than it deserves. Some people think it means the wine's higher quality, but it's really just a throwback to glass blowing and design quirks. It helps with bottle strength, stacking, and sediment collection in some wines. But it doesn't guarantee what's in the bottle is any good. You'll find cheap wines with deep punts and expensive ones without them. It's more about marketing than magic. I've seen people press the punt like they're checking for authenticity, as if shallow means shameful. But the truth is, winemakers can choose bottle shapes based on branding, practicality, or just preference. That hollow base might make pouring easier, but it doesn't add structure to the wine. Quality lives in the vineyard and the winery, not in the bottle's belly button. So stop poking the glass. It's not hiding any secrets back there. Myth: expensive wine is automatically better. People love thinking price tags are the shortcut to greatness, but that logic fizzles fast in a blind tasting. Price reflects a whole lineup of factors: rare grapes, land costs, labor, branding, distribution, taxes, not just flavor. Some of the most expensive wines come from small production vineyards in high-rent regions, but that doesn't guarantee you'll like how it tastes. Personal preference plays a massive role. I've seen people choose a $20 bottle over a $200 one when labels were hidden. Once the price is out of sight, what you actually enjoy starts to matter more than what the wine cost. Some pricey wines are designed to age and need time to show their best, while others might impress right away. But expensive doesn't always mean better. It just means costly. Wine's not a status symbol, unless you make it one. Taste it first, then decide what's worth your money, not your ego. Myth: you can judge sweetness by color. People look at a white wine and assume it's sweet, then see red and think it's dry. That logic falls apart faster than a cheap cork. Color tells you about grape skin contact, not sugar. A white wine can be bone dry, and a red can be syrupy sweet. It all depends on how the wine's made. The winemaker controls fermentation, specifically whether they let all the sugar convert into alcohol or stop it early. Rieslings, for example, can range from sharp and dry to full-on dessert mode. Meanwhile, some reds, like port, are fortified and sweet. I've watched people sip a golden Chardonnay expecting candy and get slapped with oak and acidity. Then they brace for bold dryness in a red and find it tastes like jam. Color's just a visual cue, not a sugar meter. You've got to read the label or taste it. Guessing based on color will leave you confused. Myth: white wines can't age. White wines get dismissed like they're delicate flowers that wither if left alone. But that's a huge oversimplification. While many white wines are made for early drinking, certain styles are built for the long haul. High acidity, balanced alcohol, and sometimes residual sugar can give them serious aging potential. Take Riesling, Chardonnay, or Chenin Blanc. When made with structure, they evolve beautifully, gaining complex notes like honey, nuts, and minerality over time. The idea that only reds can improve with age is more tradition than science. I've had aged white Burgundy that was richer and more layered than plenty of older reds. Aging white wine isn't about strength. It's about balance and components that hold up over time. People pour white wines young like they're on a timer, but some deserve patience. The right white with the right bones, it can outlast and outperform a lot of reds that get all the glory. Myth: most wine should be aged for years before drinking. This belief has turned basements into mausoleums for bottles that were never meant to sit that long. In reality, most wines are made to be enjoyed young, bright, fresh, and full of life. An estimated 90% are crafted to be consumed within a year, and 99% within 5. That means, unless you're collecting rare Bordeaux, Barolo, or other age-worthy styles, holding onto that bottle probably isn't doing you any favors. Wine evolves, and not always for the better. Tannins soften, acidity mellows, fruit fades. If the structure's not built for aging, what's left might taste flat or lifeless. I've tasted wines that were vibrant at release, but dull after a few years hiding in a cabinet. Aging is not an automatic upgrade. Unless it's made for the long game, drink it while it's got personality. That saving it for a special occasion mindset often turns into should have opened it sooner. Myth: you should always decant wine for hours. There's something theatrical about pouring wine into a decanter like it's about to become royalty. But not every bottle wants that kind of spotlight. Decanting does help in some cases, like separating sediment in older reds or softening intense young wines. But dragging it out for hours isn't always a good thing. Delicate wines can lose their aromatic edge if left too long. Oxygen helps open up some flavors, sure, but it can also flatten a wine if you overdo it. I've seen people dump a delicate Pinot Noir into a decanter and then wonder why it smelled like a fruit ghost after 2 hours. Some wines do benefit from a good swirl and wait, but others prefer a gentle pour, straight from the bottle. There's no universal decanting rule. If anything, the smartest move is to taste first, then decide. Wine's not a diva. It doesn't always need a dramatic entrance. Myth. Letting wine breathe means leaving an open bottle overnight. This one's like giving a houseplant air by locking it outside in a storm. Leaving an open bottle on the counter overnight isn't breathing. It's slow-motion spoilage. Oxygen's not some magic ingredient that only brings out the best. It accelerates oxidation, which can dull aromas and strip freshness. Letting it breathe usually means short, controlled exposure, like a quick decant or a few swirls in the glass. That's plenty for many wines to stretch their legs and show more complexity. But letting a bottle sit open for hours, or worse, overnight, just beats it down. I've gone back to wines the next day and found what was lively and structured now tastes tired and flat. The wine doesn't evolve forever. It has a sweet spot. Breathing isn't about neglect. It's about timing. If you're going to open a bottle and walk away until tomorrow, you're not giving it air. You're giving it a countdown. Myth. Glass shape dramatically changes the wine itself. Glassmakers would love for you to believe your wine transforms just because the bowl looks elegant or futuristic. The truth's more underwhelming. While glass shape can affect how aromas reach your nose, it doesn't actually change the wine. Controlled sensory studies show differences are often small and hard to detect when the tasters don't know what they're drinking from. I've tried the same wine in several glasses. One might feel fancier, another might make the aroma pop slightly, but the wine itself doesn't rewrite its personality. The most consistent shifts come from surface area and rim width, which affect how the wine interacts with air and how much scent hits your nose. That's it. So unless you're competing in a blind tasting championship, drinking wine from a tulip-shaped lead crystal glass isn't going to unlock hidden layers of magic. It might just make you swirl more and feel like a professional. Myth. Champagne is a generic word for any sparkling wine. Calling every sparkling wine champagne is like calling every car a Ferrari. Champagne is a legally protected term reserved only for sparkling wine from the Champagne region in France, made using specific production rules. Those rules include secondary fermentation in the bottle, strict vineyard practices, and extended aging requirements. Other regions produce excellent sparkling wines, like Cava from Spain or Prosecco from Italy, but they're not champagne and legally can't be labeled that way in many countries. I've seen people refer to everything fizzy as champagne at weddings or parties, but from a legal and wine world perspective, it's not just wrong, it's lazy. It's not about snobbery. It's about geography and method. The Champagne region has earned its status through precise historic winemaking. So when someone calls a California sparkler champagne, just know they're skipping a few important facts. The bubbles may dance the same, but they're not doing the same choreography. Myth. Sediment means the wine is flawed or gone bad. People freak out when they see sediment in a bottle, like they just found a spider in their bathwater. But sediment is completely normal, especially in older wines or those with minimal filtration. It can be tartrate crystals, harmless little shards formed from tartaric acid and potassium, or it could be spent yeast, grape solids, or tannins that have settled out with age. None of it means the wine's spoiled. In fact, sediment often shows the wine hasn't been aggressively filtered, which can be a good sign for flavor preservation. I've seen great bottles unfairly trashed because someone thought they'd gone bad when they spotted a few flecks. Just pour slowly, maybe use a decanter or filter, and leave the sludge in the bottom. Sediment doesn't ruin a wine. It just means you might need to drink carefully at the end. It's sediment, not sabotage. The wine's still very much alive. Myth. All bad smells in wine come from the same problem. Here's where wine turns into chemistry class. Not all funky aromas come from one issue, and mixing them up just leads to bad conclusions. Corked, oxidized, and reduced are different faults with different chemical causes. A corked wine usually has TCA, which smells like wet cardboard. Oxidized wine smells stale or like bruised apples because too much air got in. Reduced wines, on the other hand, can smell like rotten eggs or burnt rubber from low oxygen during production. And sulfites, those aren't the same as reduction faults, despite the confusion. Sulfites are preservatives, not the stinky culprits. I've seen tasters blame sulfur for everything weird in a glass, even when it's completely unrelated. Recognizing these faults means understanding the actual problem. It's not one single villain ruining wine. It's a rotating cast of chemistry misfires. Smells can guide you, but only if you know who's really stinking up the room.